P. Diddy ringing in the new year with a jailhouse meltdown, at least according to some new reports. All this comes as the disgraced singer spends his first holiday season behind bars, and a judge rules one of his accusers can remain anonymous.
In the dead of night, a man who once shaped culture and commerce found himself suddenly, brutally ordinary. Sean Diddy Combs, a name that used to open doors and clear rooms, woke to the cold intimacy of a blade at his throat.
By now you're well aware that 55-year-old Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, is being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. He's facing federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The charges came down in September when a grand jury indicted Diddy, half a year after those federal raids were first performed on his homes. Since he was booked, Diddy has made several bids for bail, hoping to get back to one of those homes or an apartment on New York's Upper East Side. Just last month, Diddy's team officially put in its third attempt for his release, asking that he be put on house arrest. The defense originally wanted Diddy to be held on house arrest at his Star Island mansion in Miami, Florida, one of the places that was actually raided way back in March. But Judge Arun Subramanian shot that down pretty quickly, and it was decided if Diddy was granted bail, he'd be staying in New York, specifically on the Upper East Side in a 3-bedroom apartment. That bail would have come with a $50 million price tag and some major restrictions on Diddy's house arrest. Inside the apartment, there would be 2 live-in guards and another guard downstairs. Diddy wouldn't be allowed to access any phones or the internet unless it was used to contact his legal team. And on top of all of that, there would be a vetted list of people approved to visit Diddy, including his legal counsel and, of course, his family. Diddy's attorney, Mark Agnifilo, said there was a 0% chance that Diddy would be violent if he was released, and even called the bail package a, quote, very, very rigorous set of conditions. This part is wild. He said it was even more strict than the MDC jail. But Judge Subramanian, he didn't bite on that, and Diddy's bail was denied for the 3rd time. According to a report from the Daily Mail, that's why Diddy had a breakdown. A person close to him apparently said, quote, spending the holidays behind bars was a nightmare for him. If we're to believe all this, Diddy had a meltdown in his cell and begged the guards to take him to the hospital for observation, but they refused. This same friend or person told the Daily Mail, quote, he eventually managed to calm himself down with the meditation technique he's been using while he's been behind bars. It took him a few hours of deep breathing and focusing to get out of the bad space he was in, but he finally managed it. This isn't the first time Diddy's mental health has come into question while he's been at MDC. When he first arrived, he was on suicide watch, which the U.S. Department of Justice National Institute of Corrections describes as supervisory precautions taken for suicidal inmates that require frequent observation. Diddy's suicide watch was only temporary, though. He was housed in a special protective unit of the jail after that for the first few weeks of his stay. But Diddy right now is in Gen Pop, meaning general population, the place where majority of the inmates stay. And that's where he apparently had this meltdown over the holidays, at least according to one source. Another source, though, disagrees with all of this. They say Diddy is staying strong in jail despite missing his family a great deal at Christmas, which is a time he often spends with his children. But however Diddy spent the holidays, there's still a lot of questions in the case of Sean Combs. So we're turning now to former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani to talk all things Diddy. Nima, thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Of course, Sierra. Thanks for having me, as always.
Now, some of the reports are that P. Diddy had a breakdown or meltdown over the holidays when he is still at MDC behind bars. What do you make of those reports? Could he have had this meltdown?
I believe the reports, and obviously Diddy is someone who's rich and famous and has lived a life of luxury for many years, and now he's in federal prison during the holidays. So this isn't someone who's a hardened criminal who has spent a lot of time in custody. So the fact that he's spending Christmas and New Year's and future holidays in prison is probably finally getting to him. So I'm not surprised that he cracked.
You're right. It's definitely a change of tune from his lavish mansions and the holiday season to what he's experiencing right now. As far as the mental health side,
the headlines call it an alleged attack because right now that's all the press can claim. But strip away the bylines and legal hedging and you are left with a simple, savage moment, a human being facing another human being willing to end him. He built an empire from beats and bravado, from suits and swagger, but none of that matters when you are lying on a mattress under fluorescent light with someone's breath on your face and a strip of metal pressed to your skin. Fame is an accent outside these walls. Inside, it is just another voice in a chorus of fear. The men who patrol the yard with keys and whistles can lock doors, count bodies, try to keep order, but they do not control what happens behind the slat of a cell door at 2 in the morning. Reports say it happened in a place already known for chaos, a facility where rumors of weapons and violence are not gossip but fact. People who live in those corridors for years whisper about the small, quiet decisions that keep you alive: what to say, where to sleep, who to avoid. A celebrity cuts across those codes like a flare, attracting eyes and resentments both. When a high-profile inmate arrived,
Side of things. I remember when Diddy was first arrested, he was put on suicide watch. So obviously keeping tabs on his mental health. Here in this instance, he apparently was asking for the guards to take him to the hospital so he could be treated there. Is this something that we're going to keep an eye on, Diddy's mental health behind bars?
I think so. And obviously, we haven't seen him, but your colleague Elizabeth has reported that, he looks like he's lost some weight and he has some more gray and white hairs. I think it's taken a toll on him. And I think that he expected for some reason that he would be out on bond. And obviously that hasn't happened. There were 3 different bail applications that were denied by 3 different judges, and ultimately they withdrew their appeal. So now that it's hitting him that Diddy's going to be in custody at least until May 2025, I think he's just having a tough time coming to terms with it. Because like you said, here's someone that had multiple private jets, homes in New York, Miami, Los Angeles, and all of a sudden his only home is his prison cell, and he's not getting the Christmas dinner with his family that he had. And we all saw the video of him having to spend his birthday in prison as well.
You talked about the bail that had been denied 3 separate times, and a lot of people are saying maybe Diddy did have this meltdown because he expected at this point, heading into 2025, he would be back at home, at least on house arrest. You also mentioned how his team has withdrawn their appeal. Why do you think that is? They just kind of accepted that Diddy's going to be in jail until at least the jury trial?
I think they saw the writing on the wall and the fact that, Judge Subramanian would probably be the best judge just because he's a Democratic appointee. He doesn't have a criminal background as a defense attorney or a prosecutor. So here's not someone that has a really pro-prosecution perspective. He considered this bail application for 2 hours and he still denied it. And normally when a district judge or a magistrate judge hears a bail motion, it's a de novo standard, which means for the first time. That means the previous applications, the denials, they don't have any precedential impact. But when you go up on appeal, Sarah, that changes. An appellate court can only reverse a lower court's decision on bail if it's an abuse of discretion. So they really have to defer to that lower court. So the chances of the bail application being granted on appeal were less because of the different standard. And also, we know the application has gotten worse because of Diddy's own conduct while he's in prison. We've talked about how he's used other inmates' pack numbers and he's made these 3-way calls allegedly, trying to intimidate witnesses. So not only do you have the bail denied because he's a risk of flight or danger to the community, but also because he's trying to obstruct justice and affect the integrity of the proceedings.
A lot going on even behind bars for Diddy. I know we talked, you and I believe, about those allegations that he was using other inmates' phone calls or their lines, you just mentioned it, to talk about things so that prosecutors couldn't listen in. I'm sure that federal prosecutors are still keeping a very close eye on P. Diddy, his communication with the outside world, as it were. Do you think they're going to use any of this information at the coming trial?
I do, because if you're a prosecutor, you have to anticipate the defense in the case. And the defense in this case is clear that the sexual contact happened, but it was consensual. So Diddy's defense team is going to do everything they can to convince the jury that even though the freak-offs happened, these were consensual sexual acts by adults. So how can they do this? They can do it through cross-examination to try to show that
the calculus changes. Someone might see power and want it. Someone else might see vulnerability and pounce. Imagine the soundscape of a prison at night, dim hums of lights, distant voices muffled by concrete. the soft thud of boots in a corridor. In that soundscape, a blade against a throat is not a dramatic crescendo. It is a precise, intimate instrument of terror. It demands silence. It demands compliance. The man on the receiving end is suddenly reduced to the physiology of breath, pulse, the tick of fear in his bones. He is not Sean Combs the mogul. He is a body, warm and fallible, and the rest of the world feels very, very far away. Those close to him have said he wasn't expecting it. That detail matters because surprise is a multiplier of fear. A planned confrontation is terrifying, yes, but there is a cruel geometry to an unplanned violence, the moment's rawness, the way the mind scrambles for options that aren't there. People close to him have spoken in fragments, concerned
that the victims who are testifying, they're lying. They can try to pay off the victims, either through an outright bribe or a civil settlement. I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything, but these are all possibilities. The government has raised the possibility that Diddy's trying to intimidate the witnesses so they change their testimony, because obviously we know it doesn't matter what the victims say in their civil complaints or what they told the FBI or prosecutors. They have to take the stand, testify, and tell the jurors the exact same thing. So if these victims go sideways either before or during trial, that really helps Diddy and the defense.
Hey, all you business owners or anyone thinking of a side hustle, I have to take a second and tell you about something that can seriously level up your business game. It's Odoo.com and their incredible accounting app. You know how keeping track of finances can get messy and even confusing? Well, Odoo makes it super simple. With their accounting app, you can manage invoices, expenses, and even get financial reports all in one place. Take a look at this clean interface. It's designed to save you time and reduce headaches. You can automate those repetitive tasks, which means you'll have more time to focus on what you really love, growing your business. So if you want to take control of your finances and make your accounting life a whole lot easier, check out Odoo's accounting app at our link odoo.com/lcnews29 and try Odoo for free today. So the testimony, I think this is going to be huge, something we've talked about, and it's really highly anticipated because they're the ones who were victims in this situation. Is the defense really going to attack that? The fact that these people are bearing all, it's probably going to be very emotional for them or very difficult to talk about on a public stage. Do you think that's something that the defense is really going to focus on?
I think so. We know, at least in the civil complaints, one of the defense strategies has been to out the victims. Some of them want to remain anonymous, right? And the defense, in almost every case, has filed a motion to unmask the identity of the accusers because they think, on the defense side, that maybe people will be more hesitant to come and talk about their sexual assault or sexual abuse at a very public trial. And it's hard for victims of abuse. So I do think the defense is banking on that. And we know that some of these acts happened years, sometimes even decades ago. So they're going to point out inconsistencies in any statements that they're making and argue that this shows that they're lying. And we've already seen it with a couple of the victims who have given statements already to the media. One was an interview with CNN. Another victim gave an interview with NBC. That victim, of course, being the Alabama woman who accused both Diddy and Jay-Z. And after those interviews, the reporters and the media outlets saw some inconsistencies, things that were incorrect in terms of maybe the dates or the locations of where things happened. And I think the defense is going to use that to say, well, these people aren't mistaken. They're outright lying. And the reason they're lying is they want fame, they want money. So we're going to see a very aggressive cross-examination in this case, Sierra.
The story that you brought up about Jane Doe, the woman who's accusing Diddy and Jay-Z from back in the year 2000 when she was 13 years old, that one's huge because a judge in that case just ruled she could remain Jane Doe. So for now, at least, we don't know her name. If that's the case for some of these people that the government is going to call, how will Diddy's team prepare for cross-examination if they're not sure exactly who they are or what the experience was?
So it's a little bit different in remaining anonymous in a civil case. Ultimately, if a case does go to trial, that victim will have to take the stand and testify in public.
Disbelief. A flat anger that sounds like a defense mechanism. Lawyers file motions about safety, about placement, about transferring inmates out of certain units, but paper moves slower than a knife point. And there is the question of motive. Always the question people want answered. Was this an attempted robbery? A test of nerve? A message? Prisons are ecosystems of symbolism. A threat can be currency, a scare can buy you protection, an assault can rewrite the hierarchy. For someone like Diddy, who lived much of his life in public and with accoutrements of status, any of those motives could apply. The very notion of taking from a famous person, whether it is physical goods, political capital, or simply the thrill of having power over someone the world thinks untouchable, can be intoxicating for the wrong people. The guards, the administration, the policies, none of them are immune to scrutiny now. How did a makeshift blade get inside? How did an inmate get close enough to someone in protective custody to apply it? Those questions spit directly in the face of procedures and certifications that are
the community for a couple of hours to do this process. So there had to be some high level planning, not just at the local institution and the local hospital, but obviously probably at the regional office level and maybe even at the DOJ level, saying that, hey, this individual is going to be going out for a short period of time to make sure that they're taking care of these issues that he may or may not be having with his knee.
Yeah, the planning into all of this, based on what you're saying, does sound like it was pretty specific, that they wanted to make sure everything went through smoothly. And I wanted to ask you about the logistics. I know we've talked about this before, transporting Diddy to court, which we've seen him there several times. I mean, at least the sketches. Our reporter there has seen him in real life, but we've seen the sketches. As far as this goes, though, with him going to the hospital, is it different? I mean, would he be in his jumpsuit? Would he have cuffs? Would there be somebody with him at all times, even when he's in the MRI? What would that look like?
What would happen? He would definitely go out in his institutional jumpsuit. He would be handcuffed, leg irons, and what we call a Martin chain, which is the chains around your waist, handcuffs, and then the what we call a black box. That would be a little mechanism that would go over the handcuffs to make sure that he is not moving around necessarily. And I'm almost certain that they probably had 3 or 4 staff with him and even possibly someone in a different vehicle, what we call a chase vehicle, just to make sure that everything is secure and everything is well in that regard. Now, in terms of the X-ray, I'm sure whatever cuffs that would need to be taken off for the X-ray to be done, accurately to do the process. I'm sure if they need to take off a little bit of the handcuffs or the chain or whatever, and depending on where they were going, I don't know if they would necessarily take off the leg irons, but they would make it to where he would be comfortable enough to make sure the medical procedure is done in the right way, and the staff would be right there with him at all times. No one would definitely not be leaving his side.
I'm glad that you brought up the handcuffs, because that was my first thought. Metal, MRI, we probably can't put those two together. But as you pointed out, there was probably several different corrections officers or staff with him at the time. So it sounds like that probably went through successfully and he was returned back to MDC. But let's say, for instance, P. Diddy needs another surgery. He's had, I think, 3 so far, and he's been suffering from this knee ailment for about 20 years at this point. You mentioned the New York City Marathon back in 2003. So quite a while he's had this. Let's say that he does need another surgery. What would that look like? Because I know the recovery process for a knee replacement is extensive. When my mom had it, I had to move in with her and help her with day-to-day things, but that was much different at her house rather than at MDC. So let's just say, speculate, he's going through with this surgery and then he has to go through recovery at MDC. What would that look like?
Well, I mean, inmates have procedures all the time. I mean, you have folks there with cancer, you have folks there with, serious other chronic diseases. And sometimes it does require individuals to have surgery even while they're on pretrial status. So if he would have to have the surgery, he would have it. He would go through the regular process like any other inmate. And then if the procedure does occur, he would stay in a local hospital or in a treatment facility, obviously with security there with him around the clock. And then when it's deemed that he can come back to the institution, he'd come back. I mean, there are several inmates in these facilities that are
supposed to keep everyone safe. We all whisper that prisons are dangerous, but we expect at least a baseline of order, counted bodies, locked cells, monitored interactions. When that baseline fails, the failure is not just logistical, it is moral. From the outside, a lot of people will react the same way: shock, schadenfreude, pity, condemnation. Some will say he should have been more careful, others will point to karma. The internet will do what it always does: turn fear and suffering into content, into a dozen different narratives that suit dozens of different agendas. But inside the walls, none of that commentary translates into protection or relief. The music business cannot bail you out here. Old friends can file motions and make calls, but the immediate, proximate danger is a matter of inches and seconds. What happens after an incident like this is a study in both damage control and damage. There will be medical evaluations, interviews, incident reports. There will be a shuffling of paperwork and perhaps a transfer, maybe a placement into more secure housing.
Are on crutches, that are in wheelchairs, and folks that just can't walk. I mean, there are people that actually show up to jail in a wheelchair, and you'd have other inmates there to assist them to move around the institution or the compound, or in that regard, a jail. But that's how that situation would be if he did need another procedure.
It's interesting to think about recovery inside jail, but it sounds like it's pretty common because, as you said, people go on with their lives. They could have issues, and it sounds like that's pretty much covered. So, if that's what happens, he will go through recovery there at MDC. My next question about all of this, too, it gets me thinking to kind of like TV shows or movies. So, correct me, this is like a stereotype. But sometimes we see inmates would purposely get sick, or they would conflate their injury or illness because it's fun to leave. You know, they get to go in a vehicle, then they get to spend some time at the hospital. Is this something that ever happens? I mean, would they make sure 100%, okay, P. Diddy really does need his knee checked out, or would they just kind of take his word for it?
Well, you know what, the first thing you described is a person that what we call malingers. You know, people who feign injuries, who are always constantly complaining about something. You know, when the senior staff will make rounds to the unit, or to psychological staff, or to health services personnel. Um, yeah, I mean that does happen. However, you got to keep in mind he has to have all persons have to have a physical within those 14 days, and then by him having chronic knee issues, I mean obviously they can validate that per se, and then again it would be a process for them to follow up to schedule those appointments, because like you said, some people do want to get a break and just get out of the institution for a little bit, and get away from the day-to-day noise and just being in a cell or being around other inmates for a while, maybe even eat a little bit different food. But because remember, there was a story about a month or so ago about him just wanting to go because he wasn't feeling well, and he had to do meditation to calm down, and they didn't take him out for that. So, and I'm not saying that because I can tell you, we've sent inmates out to the hospital for hangnails, or, hurting their pinky playing flag football or basketball in the unit, that kind of thing. But when it comes to individuals with a high profile nature and the security concerns that this particular person would cause, I mean, there's so many different conversations that are happening before a decision is made to take him or someone else high profile in that building out before they did that. So it would be very difficult for him to malinger and create a situation where he'll just leave just because he wants to get out for a few minutes. So if they took him out, it was for a reason.
And we have seen in the past, he's posted photos of him on Instagram where he's in the hospital. This is an ongoing thing pre his arrest or any allegations. We did hear about this knee issue. So it does sound like it is a legitimate issue that he's been dealing with for some time. And if that's the case, let's say that he's in super amount of pain. A traditional doctor would probably prescribe some pain medicine like opioids or narcotics, which are pretty, I would say, coveted in jail. You don't want to get those in the wrong hands. So would there be extra eyes on a prescription if he was given something like that to make sure he is the one taking them and no one else has access?
Well, I will tell you, each institution has their own pharmaceutical staff.
There will also be whispers and reprisals and a changed psychology that no report can capture. The mind keeps the count of every instantiation of fear. For a man who has always controlled the narrative, being controlled by fear is an unbearable inversion. Consider the broader symbolism: a life spent building a persona of strength and influence meeting a raw, human vulnerability that cannot be mediated by lawyers, brand deals, or fame. It is a humbling, violent lesson about the limits of power. It stains whatever mythology was built in luxury suites and red carpets. That mythology did not prepare him for fluorescent-lit terror or for the particular intimacy of a blade against a throat. And yet, there is also a grotesque theater to it. Prisons are places of performance, performances of toughness, of compliance, of contrition. The attack, whether planned or opportunistic, is itself a performance, a demonstration of dominance, of the ability to cut someone down. For inmates, reputation is often more valuable than currency. Stories travel fast, reputations faster. A single act can rewrite a man's place in the social economy of confinement. Let's not pretend there are simple heroes and villains here. People who commit violence inside prisons are often themselves products of years of trauma and cycles of brutality. The person holding the knife may have a history that stretches back decades. Their actions are not happening in a vacuum. The environment creates actors. The actors respond. That does not excuse violence. It contextualizes it. In a world that rewards toughness, the knife is both instrument and statement. Meanwhile, lawyers will magnify procedural failures and allege negligence. The press will parse language, alternating between careful allegedly and more sensational tone. Fans will feel betrayed or defensive. Detractors will gloat. The legal system will continue its slow, inevitable march through hearings and filings. All of these reactions are visible on the television screens outside the walls, but they do not comfort the man who lay awake with a blade at his throat. People who know the prison world well will point out the layered realities, the difference between federal and local custody, the variations in staffing, the impact of funding cuts, the prevalence of contraband. They will note the ways that understaffing can make guards less responsive, how overcrowding creates tensions, how a culture of fear begets more fear. These structural problems do not offer excuses, but they do highlight how fragile the promise of safety can be. So what does survival look like after this? Survival is not just physical, it is psychological and reputational. Physically, the immediate requirement is medical care and protective custody if necessary. Psychologically, the work is far more complex. He must reconcile the shock of vulnerability with the public narrative of invincibility. Reputation management teams and PR counselors will do what they can, crafting statements that are brief and legally appropriate. But behind those statements are human remnants, sleepless nights, a new distrust of the rhythms of prison life, a recalibration of routine. In the end, the story is a mirror. It reflects a justice system that is imperfect, a culture that is ravenous for spectacle, and human beings who are fragile beneath layers of persona. It asks uncomfortable questions. How do we protect the vulnerable, even those who once seemed untouchable? How do we reckon with environments that manufacture violence? How do we hold systems accountable without turning every incident into fodder for outrage?